I had to learn how to sell. I knew how to make a fairing, I knew how to design one, I had to learn how to make it, I had to learn how to market it, but I learned how to sell. They're not the same disciplines whatsoever. But we just thought that if we went to Daytona, and put up a sign that said, better fairings, people would come out and buy all these better fairings. Carol, would you bring the book over, the one, because I brought a very, very interesting book. I wrote a story about this event, 1967 at Daytona, and it ended up in this very book over here. Carol, hold it up. We brought some for you. Harley Davidson reader. The story, it's called Bad News and Bottle Rockets, and there's Dwayne reading a copy of it. I had Dwayne look at it and see, is this what you remember, Dwayne? And it really is. I had the world's fastest, did I not have the world's fastest motorcycle, the Yamaha 350. It was brand new, it was February of '67. I had driven it from Los Angeles to Daytona. It was broken in. We were at Daytona when we were not trying to sell fairings on the infield with this thing here. We were at this kind of like a abandoned airport. One day we woke up, it was like Sunday morning, and it sounded like it was thunder, but it wasn't thunder. It was Harley Davidson's drag racing right down the road. And so Dwayne and I and my brother, we drove down, and there were about 1 million black guys racing Harley Davidsons, all in their Sunday best. I mean, the women were like Sunday school clothes, and the guys had racing Harleys, and they were flagging them off. And so I watched it, and had the world's fastest motorcycle, this Yamaha 350. I watched him once, and I said, "Hey boy, do you want to ride? You want to run these guys?" I said, "Sure." And so I started. They had a flag man, they had it marked off, and I was beating these guys. I'd never seen a fast Harley in my life until this guy came out and they said, "Hey, you want to run Bad News?" And I said, "Sure, I'll run Bad News." There's bad news. So the story is in this book. Put the book down, Carol. That's enough. We have three or four copies of this book that we brought. It's a really, really interesting story. Dwayne, even though Dwayne was there, he was still charmed by it. Captivated him. We learned how to make ads. See all the words on that ad? That's instant type. That's not like going to a printer. That's like that little waxy letters you put in. Because I didn't know how to write on the photograph. Send it to Joe Parker at Cycle World.
Wait a minute. How'd you do against Bad News?
You got to read the book.
There's the answer right there.
That's right. Thank you.
Straight man.
Tell that story at the end.
Look at my glasses.
Bad news. Well, let me tell you what happened. No, I knew Bad News was something because he came out, bib overalls, no shirt underneath, brogan, totally bald, shiny head, and he came out with a Harley, one of those bouncy seats, you know. He came out as if he was bouncing up and down on the seat, as if that was going to warm it up or something. I mean, he was kind of intimidating, you know, and I didn't take any chances at all. I didn't take any chance at all. We staged, he was on my left, and I was on my 350. I didn't even shift with my foot. Like that, you know. This guy hole-shotted me. This guy was so far ahead of me at the end of the quarter that he stood on his running board and looked back at me. I just kept going. I went back to our campground. I never went back to see what was coming. And I don't know what Dwayne did, but I'm sure he probably left because there's a lot of money exchanged hands at that race. Anyway, that was all part of the story that's in this book that we brought you. But that's how we began. We had no idea what we were doing. We thought we sold 3 fairings at Daytona in 1967. 2. Pardon me. And with that money, we had finally enough money to go back to Illinois. But first, we went over to IHOP and did an IHOP pig out. We ate all the pancakes, and then we went and drove in. And by the time I got back to Illinois, I had 8 cents in my pocket. I didn't even have money enough for coffee. So I had to order a cup of water because it was so cold. You know, Illinois in February is cold. I put my hands in the hot water just so I could make it home. It took 3 fillings of the bathtub by the time I got home in February to warm myself up. But that's how you start, you know. We had fun, we loved it, we got great stuff. I've been telling the same story for 50 years. Story of that. I mean, it's worth a little coldness. Anyway, where are we here? What's that picture? Oh, that's Dwayne. Okay. So I learned how to do my first ads and set the pictures. And we actually were beginning to sell things, and we bought a little place about 50 feet by 50 feet in Rental. My daddy actually bought it and rented it to me. And I lived there. Dwayne lived there. Dwayne lived in his truck. I lived in my truck in the summertime, all around this place. And then in the winter, when we moved back inside and sleep next to the motorcycle fairings, that's the way it was. And we learned how to become real motorcycle fairing rights. We just hired other people like us, and we learned how to polish fiberglass. We learned how to sand edges. We learned how to do stuff, because I'd never worked for anybody else, and nobody at Vetter ever worked for anybody else either. We made this stuff up as we went. My buddy from college, Jim Miller, got out of the military. He came back and helped, and by 1970 or so, those are the greatest motorcycle fairing makers in the world right there. And I had I told a little bit of the story this morning. I had wanted to design motorcycles, and this leads to a quick little story about the development of the Hurricane, which I talked about earlier this morning. Designed that motorcycle, took it to Daytona, and BSA actually contracted me to turn that bike into the Hurricane. Which they made 1,100 and some or so, and this is one of those 1,100. Well, motorcycles in the early 1970 or so were getting bigger and bigger. Remember, the Japanese came over with 50cc bikes for a year, and then they brought 75s over, and we had to sell our 50s, and they brought 90s over, and we had to sell our 70s, and then they brought 125, and then 160s, and then 175s, and then 200s, and then 350s. I mean, that's what they did to us. It's like computer stuff they did recently. You know, you get so much RAM, you get so much, and you got to sell it. Well, that's what the Japanese did to us. They were making bigger every couple of years, bigger, and there's nothing more worthless than an old Japanese bike, because they obsolete themselves every couple of years. And so motorcycles were getting bigger, and motorcycle fairings had to get bigger along with it. And so that first little fairing I made, I had to be a couple of inches wider at your knees, at the handlebars, had to make the windshield more vertical. And when the Honda 750 came out, I made a special fairing for the Honda 750. Little sketches, you know, before you actually make it. Took one of my existing fairings and made great big air scoops for those wide 4 cylinders. And there's Dwayne again on his doing tough testing. And so now we had about 5 of these fiberglass fairings, called phantom fairings. And one day I looked up and I thought, boy, these are really great fairings, but it's not a great product. Dealers, there's no dealer that could afford to buy like a black and a white ×5 fairing, so that when a customer came in, he would have the fairing for that customer's bike. So it was a good fairing, but it was not a good product. What I needed was one fairing that would fit everything. If I could figure out how to make one fairing that would fit everything, then I would have a good product. And so that's what I went to work on. Sketched out what became the Windjammer. And I didn't make the name Windjammer up. My buddy Jim Miller, who had gone to the military and come back out and worked with me, he said, Craig, got a name for your new fairing. Well, he had said this 5 times in the last month, you know, and each time I was, oh, Jim, I don't think so. But this time, he said Windjammer. I said, that's it. Windjammer, that's the right word. So you don't have to invent everything yourself. You just have to know a good idea from a bad idea. And the Lord's blessed me with that. I can tell a good idea from a bad idea. Windjammer, I knew, was hot stuff. So we grabbed it, copyrighted it, and there I am making the first Windjammer in clay, designer's clay. One of our design students that I had graduated with was now working at Pontiac, and he said, Craig, don't you know about designer's clay? I said, no, I don't know anything about it. He said, oh, well, he told me where to get it. And so I bought, you know, a big box of it. You heat it up and it gets soft and you can shape it and it stays stable. That's designer's clay that I'm making that first fairing from. And it's the same stuff that I use even today. I have that same clay today in my oven. Warm it up, make something on it. Make a mold, make a part, put it on, see what it does. Go to the trade shows, show it off. Well, the Windjammer was the right thing at the right time. We're now at about 1971, 70, 72. And we outgrew that little shop we had and ran to a little 50 by 50 building. And we're able to go out and buy 3 acres of land east of town, east of Rantoul, and put up 2 pole buildings. One was insulated with concrete, and the other was not, because it's real cheap to put up a pole building if you don't insulate it and if you don't put concrete. But we were growing so fast that by winter we had to go back and insulate and pour concrete because we were growing too quickly. We were learning how to make windjammers, and the first windjammers, fiberglass ones, were all put together with clothespins. And we were probably the country's biggest user of clothespins. Look at the
a lot of requests. We only got a couple minutes, so we're going to
Zach, how do I make that movie go?
And then we're going to start the auction. So we can't do that till we find our drummer. So if you are our drummer,
make the movie go. Please.
Not we're going to be playing here.
I don't know. I'm smart enough to bring him. If you have to go to the other one, I'll find it. It's memories. Oh, okay. Okay, it's good. Max it out. Turn off the light. I used to carry an 8mm camera around like a holster, like a 6-gun, and I did a lot of filming. This is filming from 1970, 68, 71. Zach edited it down for us.
So calling Gary Lewani on the stage.
This is real shop footage of people making fairings in 1969.
Red Dog.
Yep. Clothespins.
God, those were old clothespins. They're the wedgers. They don't have the spring in them. They're the wedge.
That's why they have metal bands around them.
Ah.
We knew the kind of line.
So we had one search for some blues, and another one fits music to honor all the vintage motorcycles that are out here. We're going to do
Back my first big class.
and the blues goes out to Bob Rager. Right. One way out
This is the wave right there.
You gotta go over and stop those guys.
One way out there.
It's all in my window.